I'm Frank Garza, and welcome to Here and Abroad, a podcast that follows the U.S. men's national team and their player pool across Europe, MLS, or wherever else they play their club football. Mauricio Pochettino announced his USMNT roster today for the upcoming friendlies against Belgium and Portugal. On today's show, we're going to break down that roster. To help me do that, I've invited Larry Henry Jr. to join the show. Larry is the managing editor for SBI Soccer. Larry, welcome to the big roster reveal breakdown show.
Hey Frank, glad to be back with you again. 2 times in 2 weeks, so it's getting pretty crazy here. But no,
Yeah.
but glad to be back with you. Really excited to break down the roster. Obviously, a big day. Always some excitement when the rosters come out. We got to hear from Mauricio Pochettino as well today, so we're 2 for 2. So we're grooving right along.
Yeah, here we are. Okay, so just real quick before we get into it, I'm just going to kind of read through the roster. So for folks who haven't seen it yet, they can just get a real quick feel for it. Pochettino named 27 players, 4 goalkeepers, Matt Freese, Matt Turner, Chris Brady, Roman Celentano, 9 defenders, Chris Richards, Tim Reed, Miles Robinson, Mark McKenzie, Austin Trusty, Anthony Robinson, Max Arfton, Alex Freeman, and Joe Scally. 5 central midfielders, Johnny Cardoso, Christian Roldan, Tanner Tessman, Sebastian Berhalter, Aiden Morris. 6 attackers, Christian Pulisic, Timothy Weah, Weston McKennie, Malik Tillman, Brennan Aronson, and Gio Reyna. And then 3 strikers, Fuller and Balogun, Ricardo Pepi, Patrick Agyemang. So you and I, we met a week ago, and we did our roster prediction show. We guessed a 26-man roster. Pochettino chose 27, so we automatically got one of those wrong. But in my predictions, I got 21 of the 27 players correct. You, Larry Henry Jr., got 23 of the 27. And keep in mind, one of them was because we predicted 26. So you only missed on 3 players. So great job on that one. This is why I have guys like Larry on the show, because they really know their stuff. But let me ask you this. From the players that you missed, I think there was only, when I looked through the list here, you had Jonathan Klinsmann in, you had Tyler Adams in, and you had Haji Wright in. Who was the biggest snub, or who was the biggest surprising exclusion for you from the roster?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty tough, right? Obviously, Tyler Adams, we learned that obviously he's dealing with a little bit of an injury. He missed the match over the weekend at Bournemouth against Burnley. So unfortunately was not part of that. And which was a little, frustrating because we know Tyler Adams' history recently with injuries, and when he's out there, he's great to have, and when he's not out there, you can kind of tell something's missing. So we kind of maybe went into today knowing that Tyler Adams' name might not be in the mix, which kind of stinks. We love to have him there. Same thing with Haji Wright. I wrote a report last night on Monday, digging through some of the weekend stuff and learning that Haji Wright kind of had a groin issue, which is why he came off in the 62nd minute on Saturday in the 2-1 loss against Southampton. He seemed okay to me when I was watching the match. It didn't seem like, I thought it was more of a tactical change than anything. Coventry have a lot of forwards, so they rotate a lot of guys. But yeah, I didn't think it was really an injury. And then we come out, Frank Lampard says, yeah, he's got a bit of an injury. We got to get scans on him. And then as soon as I saw that, I kind of figured, well, there goes his window, considering they probably want to keep him healthy for the World Cup. Jonathan Klinsmann, I was a little shocked, maybe just, the goalkeeping situation, right? I mean, I think Matt Freese, Matt Turner are going to be your number 1, number 2 guys when it's all said and done, when the World Cup comes. I think that number 3 spot is wide open. I mean, we've talked about it. I know you had Patrick Schulte as your pick. I had Klinsmann. And Poch didn't go with either of our guys. He goes with Chris Brady and Roman Celentano, who I think are capable of being the number 3. I know I know Celentano and Brady, I believe, are both still looking for their first caps. Brady was former U20 goalkeeper, has played, week in, week out for Chicago. Same thing with Celentano with FC Cincinnati. I was a little disappointed that Klinsmann didn't get a chance. I know he's been in the mix a little bit before, but maybe with this club, I know the performances for at the club haven't been great, so maybe that's why. But I don't know if that officially rules him out of the summer, but yeah, I was a little disappointed by that. And then obviously, like I said, Adams and Wright, those injuries, Pochettino probably doesn't want to risk anybody at this point, knowing that he can try to keep them healthy for the summertime.
Yeah. So most of your exclusions were injuries, along with Jonathan Klinsmann, who, like you said, when we were talking about our prediction show, I mean, picking who that third goalkeeper was going to be was a complete, I don't know, 50-50 at not even 50-50. I mean, pretty low probability we were going to get that. And so, I mean, it sounds like you're not terribly shocked by anybody being excluded. Do I read that right?
Yeah, I mean, out of our picks, I'm not too shocked. Even going through the roster a little bit this afternoon and breaking down everybody. I mean, we had said the number we got right for this. I know my article for SBI, I picked 26 guys, and I think I got 23 or 24 correct. And it was, again, the only guys I missed out on were the injured guys, Tyler Adams, Haji Wright, and then Klinsmann, who isn't injured. But yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. Noah Kai Banks, obviously, I know we'll probably talk about him, his whole situation right now. I mean, maybe a little bit shocked he wasn't maybe called in, but then obviously we learned that he reportedly turned down a call up, so you can't really fault him for that. But yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward at this point. I think we were saying that there's not many more changes I felt like Poch could have made unless everybody was healthy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Noah Kai Banks was one of my misses. Poch spoke about him in the press conference and was very open about it, that they're speaking with him and that he's told the coaches and the federation that he just hasn't decided yet. And he asked to be, not available, for this roster selection. And so, I wasn't terribly surprised by that. I kind of, even though I predicted him to make the roster, I kind of thought there was a good chance because he hadn't decided he wouldn't get in there. Like you said, I had predicted Schulte as my third goalkeeper, but I mean, that was, I wasn't super confident about that. And then I missed on Tyler Adams. I missed on Haji Wright as well. I guess if I had to say who the biggest snub was in my mind, and it's not even like that extreme of a snub, but Alex Zendejas is the name, that comes up. He's a guy I predicted that would make the roster. He did not make it in. Potts chose, for example, Gio Reyna, who I'm sure we'll talk about pretty soon, over him. So I'm not like terribly surprised because he's one of these guys that's been on the bubble, for a while. But I did think that maybe he would warrant getting another look. Instead of some of the other players that were picked. Let's talk about then who the biggest surprise inclusion was. I'm looking through the list here of guys that made it in that neither of us picked. Chris Brady and Roman Celentano, neither of us selected them. And then Gio Reyna was the other guy that neither of us picked in our roster prediction show. I mean, who stands out to you in this roster as the biggest surprise inclusion?
Yeah, I mean, the goalkeepers, I think it's going to be it's going to be maybe four guys fighting for that number 3 spot. Like I said, Brady, I guess Celentano, Schulte, and Klinsmann, maybe Ethan Horvath. I'm not too sure if he'll even be considered by the summer, but I think Gio Reyna coming in is a shock because, as the kind of winter months went on, I was thinking, Gio Reyna obviously ended the year on a really good note with the national team. He had that goal against Paraguay. I remember I was there at Subaru Park, and he, it was really a great performance for him. He really needed it, kind of a confidence booster. Then he had an assist off the bench against Uruguay in that 5-1 romp. And then, playing time has sort of dried up for him again at club level. He hasn't really played all that much. I think in the new year, he's only played about like 26 minutes. I know he's dealt with some muscle injuries, which always seems to pop up for him. But, Pochettino was very open about Gio Reyna today, just talking about, you know, kind of hinting that it doesn't really matter his lack of playing time for club because they think he's an important piece for the national team, and they were really happy with how he came in November. He was focused, he was ready to go, he had a point to prove. Pochettino has enjoyed working with him, and so that's a really good, that's a really good compliment for Gio Reyna, and that's a really good kind of boost for him heading into the summer, knowing that maybe you don't have to rack up the minutes week in and week out at Gladbach to know that you maybe have a spot for the national team. So I was a little shocked. I didn't have him as my picks. I know you didn't either, but he definitely, I think, has qualities that can help the team. And we've seen that before when he's healthy. Would we like him to play a little more for Gladbach? Sure. But, Pochettino clearly doesn't seem to care. So that's a good kind of boost for him. That's a little bit of confidence, and maybe he can run with it now and really pad his spot for the World Cup with a good window.
Yeah. I mean, after the prediction show, you and I did our last 3 players into the roster, first 3 out of the roster. We didn't even pick him as one of our first 3 out of the roster. So that's how kind of far off we thought that he was. I was pretty shocked by him making it into this roster. I have to be honest with you, just because it's not that he's just playing a little bit at Gladbach. I mean, he's not playing at all. I mean, he's just, he was injured. Now he's back on the bench, but I don't think he's played a minute in 2026 from what I can recall. And so this guy is just not even like on the field. And I don't know, it just sends to me a message when Poch is telling everybody that you have to like compete and win your spot, and then you bring in a guy who isn't even playing at his club. I don't know, it doesn't quite make sense to me, but I wonder how much of it is just Poch and the coaching staff trying to encourage him because they know he can be a special player. Poch has said all along that he wants all the players to believe that they have a chance of making the World Cup roster. And so maybe by bringing him in, they're just giving him some more encouragement, maybe helping to motivate him a little bit that, yeah, you can make this roster, and maybe he can just take that confidence and go back to his club and earn some minutes and get in good form and start having some goals and assists and whatnot. But it just doesn't seem to fit the message that he's been saying all along. But in the press conference, he was just, like you said, he said this is a special player. He had a great November window, and we wanted to bring him back. I mean, a few other guys I missed on, Joe Scally, Johnny Cardoso. I didn't think they'd make the squad. You had him in your squad. I can't say I'm terribly surprised, that either of them, made it in. And then the goalkeepers, Chris Brady, Roman Celentano. I mean, you wonder if that's who this coaching staff has decided is the 2 guys competing for that number 3 goalkeeper position. And they're like, let's bring in both of these guys, and this is like kind of one last final competition because ultimately they can only bring 3 goalkeepers with them to the final World Cup. So I'm not terribly surprised that's the 2, but it'll be interesting to see if any of those guys get some minutes, in these upcoming friendlies. Speaking of that, let's take a look at these 27 players, and when you start to look ahead at these friendlies coming up against Belgium and Portugal, who's a player that stands out to you that, I mean, I know you're going to be keeping a close eye on all these guys, but is there somebody in particular you're going to be watching really closely in this window?
Yeah, I think one guy for sure is Patrick Agyemang. I know we had talked about him last week in the striker picture with Balogun and Pepe and Haji Wright. And Haji Wright's injury has kind of really opened the door for Agyemang to come back in because watching his match on Monday against Portsmouth, he really didn't have tons of chances. It was a sixth straight match without a goal, which has kind of been that's his longest drought of the season now in terms of not being able to score. So he's kind of hit a little bit of a dry spell with Derby County. I mean, that can obviously change by the weekend when they play again, but you would think that if Potts was bringing three strikers in and Haji Wright is healthy, Patrick Ajiman's probably not going to be picked at this moment in time just because, Balogun's scoring, it seems like every week. Haji Wright has been scoring a lot more in this calendar year than over, the November, December period. Ricardo Pepe's picked up some goals since he's come back from injury. So you think, Ajiman's probably the odd man out, but, opportunity comes for him. He comes back in. Maybe he can really do some damage in this window. And we've talked about his abilities, right? He's a little different than the rest of the strikers. I'd say he's got the most, physicality among all of them. He wins a lot of aerial duels. He's kind of a menace for the opposing defenders in terms of drawing fouls and just battling and fighting. So, he's one guy I'm definitely going to be looking at. And then the other guy I'd probably going to look at as well as Aiden Morris. I think he's had a really good season for Middlesbrough. I mean, I thought he had a really good season last year. I think he's kind of taken it up a notch this year. He's come back from his injury in the fall, and he's really hasn't missed a beat. He's playing 90 minutes each week. Kim Hellberg, the manager, seems to praise him every week just for his attitude, his performances, his abilities. He kind of plays, he does whatever needed for the team. And that's great news for him. I think that's just going to really just kind of boost his stock heading into the summer. So I think he's another guy as well that I'm going to keep an eye on.
Yeah, for me, it's Pepe. Can't wait to see him back on the field again. It's been a long time. Cardoso. It kind of feels like last chance saloon for Cardoso. You kind of wonder which of these central midfielders would have been left off the roster if Tyler Adams wasn't injured. It's a good chance that Cardoso could be the one. And so is he finally able to, we all know he's playing great at his club. He plays for one of the top clubs in the world. He's never really been able to do much with the U.S. men's national team or have a good performance. Can he finally do something, And then I'm also curious if he's going to maybe give one of the other goalkeepers a chance to start one of these matches. I don't think he will because he just hasn't been doing that in windows. He's been giving all the starts to Freeze. But it would be interesting to see if he gave Matt Turner an opportunity or, Chris Brady or Roman Celentano, who are two of the guys that are battling for one of these final goalkeeping spots. But there's all kinds of guys that are going to be fun to watch. Joe Scally's another one where you feel like this could be last chance saloon to him. I mean, if Serginho Dest wasn't injured, would he have made this roster? This could be his last opportunity to impress. Last thing I want to ask you, but I want to mention a few more guys we haven't talked about that were left off the roster that I think are notable. Tristan Blackman, we had talked about him maybe making it in as a center back. You got Jack McGlynn and Yunus Musa, who did not make the roster. Diego Luna did not make the roster. We think, again, because of injury. Out of those guys, let's take Diego Luna off the board because I think he just had an injury. But out of Tristan Blackman, Jack McGlynn, Yunus Musa, which of those three do you think have the best chance to ultimately make the final World Cup roster? Do you think their chances are just super, super low?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really tough for them at this point. I know Blackman and McGlynn are kind of in the, opening weeks of the season, so they're back playing again. Musa has kind of rejuvenated himself a bit at Atalanta in terms of playing time. He's playing a little more regularly now. I know he had a couple, big goals for them, which was important. And I know we had even talked about him potentially even being in this roster just, from those performances, but it seems like he's kind of gone back a little bit to the bench. And, maybe he'll get a start here on the weekend. But yeah, I don't know. I think unless there's some other injuries that happen to some guys, and hopefully not, I think these guys might be done for. I even thought, you know, Yunus Musa or Gio Reyna, you can make even an argument, between those two, right? I mean, both aren't really playing all that much for their club. Musa at least has some goals to him over the last couple weeks, whereas, Gio is the goal contributions really haven't come at all this season. So yeah, I don't know. I think if I'm making the final roster tomorrow, I don't think any three of them are getting on. And, even in a month's time, I don't think either any of them are getting on unless there's some crazy amount of injuries that happen. I think McGlynn is a talented player. I think he'll definitely, be in the mix for 2030 and the competitions that go along before that, with qualifying and everything like that. He's still young. And same thing with Musa. But yeah, I just think their time's kind of passed at this point.
Yeah. I think about Gio Reyna, and I think if Gio Reyna doesn't make it in, who would be the likely replacement, for him? Who would take that opportunity? Because you never know. I mean, Gio could get hurt again. He's struggled with issues already this year with injuries. Maybe Poch at the end of the day gives him these opportunities and he's still not playing with his club, and he just says, you know what, I've given Gio all the chances I can. I'm going to bring in somebody who's in better form. In that type of case, I think Jack McGlynn has a decent chance. I think Alex Zendejas has a decent chance. They're different players than Gio Reyna, but they're guys who could give you something, I think, off the bench. If you needed a spark, if you needed a goal late in a match and you had to bring somebody off the bench, I think those two guys maybe are a spark that you could bring in. But I agree that those players that I named, Blackman, Musa, and McGlynn, their chances are looking pretty low right now from not making it into this March roster. All right, Larry. Well, that's it for today. You'll be back next week, right? The good news is that Larry's going to be here for the entire March window, or at least that's the plan. So we'll be back next week to do a preview show, and then you'll be with me again for the following week, which will be our kind of reaction show after we get to actually see these friendlies. So thanks so much for coming on. I'll make sure and put links in the show notes to your X account, which is at lhenry019, and also to your work at SBI Soccer. Larry, thanks, and I'll see you next week.
Sounds good, Frank. Thanks for having me, and be fun next week to dial you in from Atlanta. It should be a good trip down for the at least for the Saturday match.
All right. So the first one is the one you're going to see is Portugal.
Belgium.
Belgium is first. Okay, then Portugal. Okay, that's cool. All right, you'll be there giving us the inside scoop of what's going on the ground. Look forward to that. Thanks to everyone for listening to Here and Abroad. If you enjoyed the episode, please do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or that follow button if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or somewhere else. Thank you so much. I'm Frank Garza. You can follow me on X at FrankGarza007, and I'll be back next week with a new episode.